But we are going to continue our summer series as we have been in the book of Judges. And we have been talking about Gideon's life. And we finished chapter 7 last week. And we're going to jump into chapter 8 this week. And we're going to go all of chapter 8 today. We're going to tackle the whole thing, God willing. We're going to get it done. But one of the things I love, every time I read the Bible, no matter where I'm at in the Bible, I'm so thankful that we have a God that doesn't give up on us. No matter what we go through, no matter how many mistakes we have made, he doesn't give up on us. He keeps giving us other opportunities. And I love the fact that no matter where we are at life, if we are a new Christian, if we are been a Christian for a long time, there are things that God just wants from us, and he looks at. And God looks for those who are available, teachable, and obedient. And I hope that this series, going through this, encourages all of us to be those three things. Lord, I want to be available to you. I want to have a teachable spirit. Teach me, O Lord, your ways. Because our ways, we know what happens then. And Lord, let me be obedient to your teaching. It's one of the things that Gideon did. But I wish I could say that everything Gideon did was perfect and that at the end of his life, he did it well and he did it the right way, but in a lot of ways he didn't. And there are lessons that we can learn from Gideon so that we don't make the same mistakes. And throughout Gideon's life, just like every character in the Bible and just like us, there are turning point moments that we have. Anybody have a turning point moment like that moment that you met Jesus? It's a turning point moment, right? Like that time where, like a turning point moment was when my wife was like, yes, I'll marry you. That I really like you. I'm going to stick with you. That was a turning point moment. Like I was like, yay, somebody likes me. I mean, it was awesome. Turning point moments of our life. We all have those. And we have to ask ourselves, are we going to continue to move forwards or are we going to go backwards into the cycle of sin that we came from? Israel had those moments all the time. We have those moments. I had those moments when I was standing in the gym and I was in charge of practice and I had to count everybody's laps. And I had 4 guys that ran the first 3 and quit the rest, but they wanted me to lie to the coach. And these guys were not small. They made me look small. And these guys all ganged up on me and they were like, you're going to lie for us. And I had a choice of whether to lie and live or tell the truth and possibly die. At least take the beating of my life. And it's a turning point moment. And I chose to tell the truth. I could have easily lied and made things easier on myself. But I didn't. It's a turning point moment. We have those moments. There are times where, as a pastor, I have to make difficult decisions. And those difficult decisions, I know that there's people that want me to do this and there's people that want me to do this, but my decision has to be what God wants to do. And it's moments of trusting God's processes over my processes. There's moments of trusting God with all my heart, which is what I have to do all the time. And you've had those moments, those turning point moments. Do I pick up that bottle in my anger and drink, or do I throw it away and choose to overcome? Do I choose to live in discouragement, or do I choose to overcome? Do I choose to highlight my problems over my kids? Or do I pull them close? Do I choose to show my love for God or my acceptance for everything else? We all have turning point moments. And I just want to tell you, I'm thankful for a God who's patient with me. I'm thankful for a God who continues to give me a second and third chance. I'm thankful for a God who's never given up on me, even though there are times where I've given up on him or blamed him. I'm thankful for God, Jehovah, Yahweh, whose grace overflows and he never runs out. And if you haven't figured out, the title of today's message is A Turning Point. And unfortunately, a lot of those points, they come into this crisis mode, but it's okay. There's nothing like a crisis to get us serious about Jesus. And I love the fact that God's overflowing grace leads us to overflowing thanksgiving. Psalm 57:1 says, "Please, God, show me mercy. Open your grace fountain for me, for you are my soul's true shelter. I will hide beneath the shadow of your embrace, under the wings of your cherubim, until this terrible trouble is past." Open your grace fountain. I love the fact that God never runs out of grace. No matter what I've done, no matter the mess up I've made, he has grace for my situation. No matter how many times I turned from him. When I was young, he still had grace. Thank you. We need to make sure also that the grace that we're receiving, we have grace for those around us. Because unfortunately, when we become Christian, I don't know, we just turn off the grace fountain for some reason or towards other people. They did me wrong. Well, there's lots of people that are going to do you wrong. You got to have grace. You got to have grace. If Jesus had grace for us, we can have grace for others. And then with his grace comes peace. I love what John Maxwell says. He says, "Grace always runs downhill. It met me when I was at the bottom, not at the top." Is anybody else right there? And I love the fact that God's grace never abandons his people. Well, why are you talking so much about grace? I thought we were talking about Gideon. Well, when we get to the end of Gideon's life, we realize that God's still a God of grace. He's still a God of grace. Even though Gideon had to do hard things, God's a God of grace. We need to be a people of grace. Our key scripture is Judges 8:23. It says, "But Gideon replied, I will not rule over you, nor will my son." And he says, "The Lord will rule over you." The Lord will rule over you. Come on. There's nothing else deserves or is worthy of ruling over your life. The Lord will rule over you. And those are turning point choices that we have to make. Lord, I'm going to let you rule. And we have to have a turning point with our chosen words. And we're going to see that here in chapter 8, verse 1. Now, there's some chosen words that Gideon makes. And he has to follow through with these things. And there's words that are spoken to him. But I love how this happens. Verse 1 says, "Then the people of Ephraim asked Gideon, 'Why have you treated us this way?'" Now, just think about this. Gideon just went through this massive battle. He was told, the only weapons I'm giving you are what? The ram's horn, right? You're getting the shofar. You're getting a clay jar and a torch. Battle on. That's the weapons I'm giving you. And he took his number from thousands for 32,000 to 300. And so here's Gideon. He's done all this stuff. He's done everything he's been told to do. He's chased the men down, went to the front, beat them to the Jordan River so that they couldn't drink and get rehydrated. And he stopped them there. And then the men of Ephraim are upset. "Why have you treated us this way? Why didn't you send for us when you first went out to fight the Midianites?" And they argued heatedly with Gideon. Now we have to understand, Gideon only asked 4 out of the 12 tribes to come and fight. But let me tell you, Gideon's a smooth talker with his words. He's got some good Gideon becomes like the ultimate politician right here. Verse 2, it says, but Gideon replied, because if that would have been us, we probably would have said something. Do you know what I've been through? Do you know what these other 299 have been through? Shut up. But that's not what he does. He comes up and goes, what have I accomplished compared to you? How many of us would have had that response? Then he says, aren't even the leftover grapes of Ephraim's harvest better than the entire crop of my little clan of Abiezer? God gave you victory over Oreb and Zeb, the commanders of the Midianite army. What have I accomplished compared to that? And the only reason they did that is because Gideon's group took them down, told them what to do, and they captured them and then cut off their heads and presented them to Gideon. What have I accomplished compared to that? When the men of Ephraim heard Gideon's answer, their anger subsided. See, Gideon learned a principle long before it was written down in Proverbs. And we learn it in Proverbs 15, 1 through 2. A gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words make tempers flare. Anybody got in a nice argument at home? Okay, don't look at anybody. Then it says this, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge appealing, but the mouth of a fool belches out foolishness. This is great advice for us as believers. We've got to learn to use our words correctly because people are going to speak nonsense into your life. People are going to speak division into your life. People are going to speak apathy into your life. People are going to speak hate into your life. How are we going to respond? How are we going to respond? Are we going to be a people that spreads fear over faith, death over life, opinion over fact? We're going to speak with our own agenda or with God's? Peace over ridicule, truth over lies. Our words, ladies and gentlemen, as believers are to bring life and convey truth. Our words can tear people down and tear people up worse than anything else. In fact, there are several of you here that you probably have words that someone spoke over you, a parent spoke over you years ago that have haunted you. Maybe it's people that you called friends, but they weren't really your friends, that cursed you. And those words have haunted you. Maybe it was an ex, a spouse, or somebody that hurt you long ago. And those words have followed you. I want to let you know today can be a turning point in your life. You can get freedom from that. Our words, ladies and gentlemen, as Christians have supernatural implications. And our words give us access to living a kingdom down lifestyle versus a hell up lifestyle. Psalm 19:14 says, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to who? You, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. The words that come out of our mouth need to be pleasing to him. Because you're not just speaking from you to someone else, you're speaking for him. And our rooms, our words, just like these the kids up here, when they roar, they can change the atmosphere of the room. So can our words. Can change the atmosphere of our homes. And words will reveal our character. C.S. Lewis says, we are what we believe we are. What do we believe we are? I am a sanctified, born again, anointed child of God who has been set free from the curse of sin and death. That is who I am. I am blessed. I have been lifted up. I no longer live under the world. I don't live under man's opinion. I live under the anointing of King Jesus. Who do you say you are? I tell my wife how anointed I am all the time. Then she hits me. No. Proverbs 12:14 says, wise words bring many benefits, and hard work brings rewards. And Gideon was about to use some very strong words. You saw him be gracious. Oh, there's times for grace. But now Gideon's going after some people. Because this is like how I would respond too. This is where I can see Gideon's point. And this is where Gideon decides, is my talk going to be cheap or am I going to be a man of action? Because a lot of people, unfortunately for the church, talk has been cheap. We need to be a people who are active in the things of God and back up what we say. So here's what happens. It says, Gideon crossed the Jordan River with his 300 men, and though exhausted, they continued to chase the enemy. When they reached Succoth, Gideon asked the leaders of the town, please give my warriors some food. They are very tired. I am chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Succoth replied, catch Zebah and Zalmunna first, then we will feed your army. Anybody ever been hangry? This is what happens. This is godly hangry. So Gideon said, after the Lord gives me victory over Zebah and Zalmunna, I will return and tear your flesh with the thorns and briars from the wilderness. From there, Gideon went up to Peniel and asked again for food, but he got the same answer. So he said to the people of Peniel, after I return in victory, I will tear down this tower. And by this time, Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with about 15,000 warriors, all that remained of the allied armies of the east. For 120,000 had already been killed. Look, Gideon already saw God take out 120,000. 15,000 left, no problem. Right? So Gideon circled around by the caravan route east of Nobah and Hardward, taking the Midianite army by surprise. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two Midianite kings, fled, but Gideon chased them down and captured all their warriors. Now just think, he's made a promise to these two areas, Succoth and Peniel. I will whip you, and then I'm going to tear down your tower. And they don't believe him. They think your talk is cheap. Well, here is Gideon after capturing all the warriors. After this, Gideon returned from the battle by way of Harris Pass. There he captured a young man from Succoth and demanded that he write down the names of the 77 officials and elders in the town. I want their name. I want their address. I want where they work. I want it all. And it just so happened this kid knew where they all were. Love how God works. Gideon turned his attention to what these guys were doing. I'll whip you and tear your tower down. Gideon, verse 15, then returned to Succoth and said to the leaders, here are Zebah and Zalmunna. When we were here before, you taunted me, saying, catch them first, and then we will feed your exhausted army. Then Gideon, because he's a man of his word, took the elders of the town and taught them a lesson, punishing them with thorns and briars from the wilderness. He also tore down the tower of Peniel and killed all the men in the town. Now, why is that significant? The tower of Peniel means face of God. People would turn towards that tower when trouble came. It was a defensive tower. They had people stationed up there watching for enemies coming. And Gideon was like, what you think is the face of God, I'm going to tear it down. And you're going to be defenseless. Oh, and by the way, I want to wipe out all your men too. Enjoy your town. All we asked for was some bread. You think, man, that's extreme. It's a little extreme. But he had to. What happened before when Israel went into the promised land and didn't kill everybody? When they didn't follow through with what the Lord said, well, they got in trouble. He's like, I'm not getting in trouble. I'm going to do this. And then here's what happens in verse 18. Then Gideon turned to the kings, Zebah and Zalmunna. The king you killed at Tabor, what were they like? Like you, they replied. They all had the look of a king's son. Verse 19. They were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. Gideon exclaimed, as surely as the Lord lives, I wouldn't kill you if you hadn't killed them. Turning to Jether, his oldest son, he said, kill them. But Jether did not draw his sword, for he was only a boy and was afraid. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said to Gideon, be a man. Kill us yourself. So Gideon killed them both and took the royal ornaments from the necks of their camels. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Number one, Gideon backed up what he said he was going to do. And there's a lot that we can learn from that. Living in today's culture, are we backing up what we believe in, or are we backing down? What are we doing as a church, as a people, as the ambassadors of Christ? How are we responded? God didn't ask Gideon to do something easy. I don't know where it says in the Bible that when we become Christians, we just get the easy assignments. Because we don't get the easy stuff. God's looking for us to be what? Obedient. Available, teachable, and obedient. And that means we have to go through some mess. And unfortunately for the big church, the big C church, for many years, talk has been cheap. We're a Christian on Sunday for a couple hours, but how are we doing the rest of the week? Don't you love chapter 8? I love the fact that Gideon, he wasn't too prideful. Gideon actually asked for help. He could have not. He could have just done his own thing. But you know, Gideon and everything that he was doing, he reached out for help. There are so many people, unfortunately, in our church, we're too prideful. We're not going to reach out for help. Why? God gave us a people to get help from. We're supposed to help one another. We're supposed to lift each other up. We're supposed to have words of encouragement. But for some reason, we're like, well, I don't want people to know what I'm going through. Why? Your life is messy, so's mine. Well, my life's messier. Who's judging that? Who's judging that? Because the only judge that we respond to is God. When we need help, we're supposed to ask for help. Because if we don't, let me tell you what you just adopted. Pride. And you said, pride, come on in. My heart's open to you. And then you get mad at God because he's not helping. Because we didn't guard our heart, we let pride in. Hey, after service, y'all always tell me, we're so thankful that you speak truth, Pastor. I speak truth because I've walked through every bit of this. Gideon reached out for help. We got to reach out for help. And God's going to judge us by our actions. We cannot be lukewarm in our faith. We cannot come and be super Christian on Sunday morning and live like hell the rest of the week. Revelation 3:16 says, but since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Let's not be lukewarm. Look, we can say we're all about righteousness and holiness, but it's got to be proven by our actions. But maybe today it's a turning point moment for us. And Gideon's at another turning point moment. A turning point moment where he becomes lost in success. Now Gideon has done, so far he's been honorable. He has done everything that God has told him to do. He's been obedient. But right here, you think, hey, he's been obedient all this time, but he makes a mistake. And I just read it. So Gideon killed them both. That's not the mistake. And took the royal ornaments from the necks of their camels. Let me read to you what that is. Another version, Passion Translation says, so Gideon executed them and plundered the crescent ornaments that hung on the necks of their camels. You can go to the Living Version, the Tree of Life version. It's the crescent ornaments that hung on the necks of their animals, of their camels. The crescent ornament is from the Ishmaelites. It is a pagan ornament. There's nothing godly about the ornament. And what does he do? He takes the ornament for himself and brings it into his camp. And that ornament represents the demon god Allah. So he takes this demonic symbol and he brings it into his camp. But then he does something really awesome, because that's what we do. Verse 22, then the Israelites said to Gideon, be our ruler. You and your son and your grandson will be our rulers, for you have rescued us from Midian. And this is Gideon. His reply is awesome. I will not rule over you, nor will my son. This is our key scripture. The Lord will rule over you. Woo! Right? Way to go, Gideon. Verse 24. The first word after in verse 24. However, it's never a good way to start. However, because I love what he just said, right? The Lord will rule over you. Passion Translation says, Yahweh is to be your only king. The Lord is your king. Whew. But then here is this. However, I do have one request. That each of you give me an earring from the plunder you collected from your fallen enemies, the enemies being Ishmaelites, who all wore gold earrings. So if you think that in the 70s guys were the first to wear earrings, they're wrong. They collected. He's like, give me an earring from the plunder. Gladly, they replied. They spread out a cloak, and each one threw in a gold earring he had gathered from the plunder. The weight of the gold earrings was 43 pounds, not including the royal ornaments and pendants. The purple clothing worn by the kings of Midian Well, we just started getting greedier. Or the chains around the necks of their camels. Now, today, the equivalent of just the earrings would be about $1.3 million. But there's a turning point here for Gideon. Right here. I've accepted this into my house. Now, the Lord, Yahweh, will rule over you. But I'd like a little compensation. You know, I felt like I deserved some. Maybe I could tax you. I'm going to start acting like a king a little bit instead of the judge that I'm supposed to be. And there's a turning point, and he starts bringing stuff in that he wasn't supposed to bring in. It's like he didn't learn from Achan's sin. When the Lord told Joshua, don't bring anything in. Do not collect any of it. Destroy it all. And Achan kept some. And his whole family was killed because of it. Gideon is a proven leader. But here's what happens. Verse 27, Gideon made a sacred ephod from the gold and put it into Ophrah, his hometown. He brought it home. But soon all the Israelites prostituted themselves by worshiping it, and it became a trap for Gideon and his family. Tree of Life version says, Gideon made it into an ephod and put it in his town Ophrah, but all Israel prostituted themselves after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his household. The Hebrew word there for snare is mapach. It is used to express the idea of causing to ruin or destroy something or someone. Gideon has been a proven leader, but he begins to take this stuff in that's not of God, that God didn't tell him to start taking in. And then he thought, I'm going to do something really good with this. I'm going to make an ephod, which represents God, and I'm going to set this whole thing up, and it's going to represent the goodness. No, because people started praying to it instead of God. Once we start opening a door for evil to come in, more evil is going to try to come, and it's going to do everything it can to keep our eyes fixed on it instead of God. And we have to be careful about the things that we bring into our home. If you are going to Target and buying a Ouija board and bringing it into your home, you need to get rid of it. And don't get rid of it so somebody else can use it. Burn that sucker. If you have tarot cards, you need to burn them. Because all that is attached to witchcraft. Get rid of it. Why would we want witchcraft in a holy place? Your turning point can start right now. Start now. But I had every great intention. That's awesome, but God didn't tell you to do that. Gideon started to disobey. And he started thinking of how great his mind was instead of presenting it to the Lord. What he should have done is go, Lord, do you want me to take that ornament from the camel? Do you want me to bring this into... It doesn't even say that he sanctified it. It doesn't say that. And then Gideon began to indulge in idolatry, which led him to adultery. Well, how do you know that? Judges 8, verse 28 says, that is the story of how the people of Israel defeated Midian, which never recovered. Throughout the rest of Gideon's lifetime, about 40 years, there was peace in the land. Then Gideon, son of Joash, returned home. He had 70 sons born to him. It's not from one wife, people. she'd be dead if that happened. Said, for he had many wives. He also had a concubine in Shechem who gave birth to a son whom he named Abimelech. He had all these wives and had time for a side chick. Dude. Like, I can't even think about, like, man, I got one wife. I'm doing really good to keep her happy. I want her happy. He's like, I have many wives. You're an idiot. Setting yourself up for failure. I have one wife. She's good. I'm keeping it right there. And then they didn't even, how do you have a side chick on all that? That's just crazy. But here's what's going on. The idolatry, we brought it into the house. Now it's leading to all kinds of things. Well, Pastor, didn't Jewish people, they had multiple wives back then? Well, that was a culture thing. What's Genesis 2:24 say? That's at the very beginning. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. And Jesus reiterates this in Matthew 19 and Mark 10, and then Paul quotes it in 2 of the verses in the New Testament. Being married to multiple people was wrong then, it's wrong now. But Gideon had justified all of it in his heart. And you need to understand this. Justification always leads us from obedience to disobedience. Always. Let me ask you this question. Did Jesus die and rise for us so that we can justify our actions and abuse his grace? Is there anything in our lives that we're trying to justify that we just need to turn from today? We need to lay it down, and we need to get rid of it. And we just need to have a turning point session here today. And there's one thing that we can learn, a turning point lesson that we can learn from Gideon, and that is to always guard your heart. Always guard your heart. 1 Corinthians 16:13. Be on guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. And Proverbs 4:23. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Gideon did so good. And then he started letting little things in. In verse 33, he says, as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites prostituted themselves by worshiping the images of Baal, making Baal Berith their god. They forgot the Lord their God, who had rescued them from all their enemies surrounding them. Nor did they show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, despite all the good he had done for Israel. Why? Because he already let an idol in. Let's not let idols into our lives. Let's not let things into our lives that aren't supposed to be there. Let's make sure we are doing what Jesus told us to do. How do we stay away from all that stuff? He told us. Mark 12:29. The most important commandment is this. Listen, O Israel. Listen, church. Listen, people of God. Listen, children of God. The Lord is our God, and he is the one and only Lord. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your... Gotta do it. And if you need a turning point moment, today's the day. Maybe we've let doubt in. Let's turn today. Maybe we've just let more pain in than we've let God in. Let's turn today. Let today be your turning point. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lord will rule over your depression. The Lord will rule over any witchcraft that we've accidentally brought in. The Lord will rule over any problem that we have. Go back. Yahweh is to be your only king. I've had this generational thought process, and I just can't get breakthrough. Yahweh is to be your king. The Lord will rule over those thoughts. You don't understand. I've always done this, and this is just how my life is. This is just how I am. The Lord will rule over you. But I didn't realize that I had brought all this stuff in. That's grace. That's okay. There's a grace fountain where you can bring it before the Lord. He will pour out his grace, and he will let you know, I will rule over. Those things have no hold. Those things that bring you restlessness, those things that hurt you, those things that destroy your heart, those things that tear you apart from the inside out, those things won't rule you anymore. The Lord will rule. The Lord will rule. So let's learn from Gideon. Let's have a turning point moment. I'm going to ask us to stand together. I'm going to ask our ministry team to come and to get position, because I believe that there are several of us here this morning. We're ready. We don't want to walk down that path. We're tired of letting things in accidentally. We don't want any of that stuff in our homes and our lives. It's time for a turning point to happen. Maybe we've just become super religious. Well, I know everything about God. No, you don't. Maybe we just become a little apathetic. We get excited here, and it's hard to hold on to it when we leave here. It's time. Whatever's going on in your life, let today be a turning point. Why? Because we serve the living God.